when there's a task that you must, should, need to, got to do, what do you say to yourself? How do you motivate yourself? How do you motivate yourself? How do you talk to yourself? What do you got to say to yourself before you do it?
I really want to.
Want to. Choose to. Need to. Desire.
I must.
Want to.
I must.
Gotta do it. Have to. Get to. Should. Not all over yourself.
I can.
Yeah. Modes of operandi define the boundaries of our belief system, I like to say. Therefore, when you talk to a person, they give their modus operandi, give it back to them. Very important. Yeah. The question we need to ask ourselves, do they work? Do they serve us well?
So once again, like all the others, none of these are bad. They're just different choices. I feel perfectly fine saying I must run, or I must write this, or I have to. I have no semantic reaction to that. It helps just as well to say I get to, I want to, I can. But some people will have a semantic reaction to the have to or the must.
Ed said, got to.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, there's some things that I want to do, and there's some things I got to do.
What's the difference? Give him a microphone. Here's a good example. He said, there's some things I want to do, and there's some things I got to do.
Yeah, there's some things I want to do, and there's some things I got to do.
What's the difference?
Well, some of them I want to do, and some of them I got to do.
The ones you got to do, I take it you don't want to do them, but you got to do them.
Right.
Yeah.
Are there some things that you got to do that's okay?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So that's where it's semantically harmless.
Yeah.
But the word is not necessarily a bad term or that creates negative states or unpleasant states or even pressure states. I've just got to do this. I've got to breathe, got to sleep, got to eat.
Clean the cat box.
Find the ones that motivate you with the least amount of negative kinesthetic. Find the ones that motivate you and you really feel good. It really excites you. Those that really get you going excitedly in great mood and great state, resourceful state.
So you'll notice on the board we say this is your MO, your modus operandi. This is your way and mode of operating in the world. And necessity means that you live, and your mode of operation is that there are laws to be obeyed in your head. Whereas desire is that the world that you live in is a world of passion and desire and hope and dreams and visions. And the possibility is a world of possibility, of can, of imagination, or impossibility, a world of what is not possible. And so these modal operators, that comes from transformational grammar, the modals, as a linguistic distinction, now shows up as a meta-program and a meta-model distinction.
Okay. Got a lot of that over here. Reference sort. What do you prefer? When you come to this training, what is more important? The people here?
Who's here?
Who's here? The things? How things arranged, the furniture and all of that. All the activities that's going on. Being in Grand Junction or information you're getting. Which one of these tends to be most important to you?
Information for me.
The information.
Information people.
Information people.
So when you
People
take
information.
People information.
So when you take a vacation, what are you sorting for? What are you attending?
Well, I think what I ended up doing was ranking information number 1 and everything else
Well, we're really surprised
at number 2.
That really amazes us.
But when I rank a vacation, it's primarily kinesthetic. Go for like temperature and lack of precipitation. In other words, in the winter I go on vacation, I want to go someplace warm and dry.
So you're sorting for location.
Location.
Well, not location so much as temperature and precipitation. I don't care if it's Florida or Texas or California or Arizona, but I want it to be warm and dry.
This is vacation.
Going on vacation in the winter.
Isn't that still location? It's just that it's still location. It's just you haven't said what it was, where it was. You're looking for one.
You're looking for a location that meets those criteria.
Now, usually NLP people like information. It's pretty high for most of you.
So this preference sort, if you're going to talk about where you live, what are you sorting for? Location, people, so who you're around or who you're near or where it's at or what you can do there, activity.
You guys notice I don't have a PowerPoint on it. You want to mention that?
Time sort, is this under the same category?
Yes, sure is.
Now, on a short-term basis, one of the things that happens for me is if you say, where do you want to go for dinner, I say, who's going? Before I say...
That? When you say, who's going? What's these people?
So I go for people before I go for any of the others, and then food becomes secondary.
No, go ahead.
Let's go to number 25, top page 101.
Here's a continuum of how you go after your goals. And on one end is people who don't go after the goals. They feel defeated. They feel skeptical of goals. Goals don't work. I don't set New Year's resolutions. To the people at the other end, that it's got to be right. It's got to be perfect. It's got to be absolutely flawless in perfection. And they think about the end product. And then somewhere in the middle is the optimizing, where you're moving towards your goals, but you're doing the best you can, and it doesn't make any difference if it's perfect or not perfect. And so somewhere along this continuum of going after your goal. So when you set a goal, when you decide to write an article, to do a training, to create a product or process, when you set a goal for your health or fitness, how do you go about doing that? If you don't do that, if you just excuse yourself, then you're probably at that defeatist end. And if you prepare and prepare and prepare, and you just keep refining, and you don't get started until it's just right, then that perfectionistic end, and then somewhere in between. So how do you strive toward your goal, and how do you sort for moving toward goals? The perfectionist will tend to be overwhelming him or herself, and therefore doing a lot of procrastinating because it's not quite ready. Almost ready, but not quite. It could be more, I need to do something else. Where the optimizing person is the person who says, well, I've got a good start, so I'm going to get started. And they're optimizing the time, energy, structure, those kinds of things. And, of course, the others don't even get started. So how do you go after goals?
I find myself as an optimizing perfectionist. I start out with, I'll start running with it. And then I'll be concerned about it, wanting to do not a perfect job, but it's a really good job. I've given up the perfection frame, and so thank you, Alan. So that's how I work towards a goal.
Let me mention something about perfectionism as far as what it means psychologically. Now, the word perfect here or perfectionism does not actually mean flawless. It means the feeling on the inside, it could be better. I could do better. It's not good enough.
Not good enough.
So not good enough and could be better is the feeling of perfectionism. And, of course, it's easy to get that installed from a teacher, from a parent, from anybody who says, well, why didn't you get an A? You got just an A minus. You got a B plus. Why didn't you get an A? Not good enough. And so that sense of, it could be better, I could do better, is what we mean by perfectionism. It doesn't mean you're flawless, because perfectionists are the last ones to think they're flawless.
There's actually a fourth category that you don't have in here that they call satisficing. That is to say, you don't try and make it optimum, you just try and make it good enough.
Yeah, and that's what we mean by optimizing.
Okay.
We're going to optimize, we're going to do the best we can with what we got and leave it at that.
I'm going to have a product in a month or two after this is over with, and I need to get from this internal out and look and see what's on the market and compare with what I got. So that is like a meta state, going up here and looking around.
Okay.
Because I used to be a perfectionist.
Used to. That's a good thing, used to be.
Now, Tony mentioned that really the only choice we have, the only reality one here is the optimizing. Of course, there's degrees of it, and how satisfied you are. Sometimes we start going after a goal, and everything we want to do, we want to optimize it as best we can, instead of just kind of a low-level optimizing, just doing the best we can. When I started running some 27, 28 years ago, and I started running some races, every day I wanted to, be timing myself every round, every corner, and making sure I was doing 6-minute pace, 5.5-minute pace, and on good days 5-minute pace. Just real. And now I'm just satisfied if I can do an 8-minute pace. And so this is that optimizing at a lower level to where I'm satisfied with it. I don't have to do everything I do and optimize it to the best I can. I leave a few things there, but the other thing, and so that's that optimizing. And there's all kinds of degrees and priorities, so that we prioritize a few things that we really give ourselves to, and then we go after some goals. But it doesn't have to be with everything we have. We can do it partially.
It kind of reminded me of you mentioned doing your best, and actually your best is time specific, very based on what resources you had available to you at the time that you were doing whatever you were doing. So really, if you dissociate from whatever it is you're doing and look down on it and accept that what you did was your best at that moment, it makes it a whole lot easier on you than this drive to be in absolute perfection. And then knowing that your best in that moment can improve to be best in a future moment.
Yeah.
And I want to thank Bob and John for your help while I've been here.
Yeah. And so even optimizing, so some things doing the best we can at that moment, and then sometimes part of optimizing is doing good enough. That's how I treat house cleaning. Good enough.
Or tired.
Good enough.
Given your reframe on perfectionism, I realize that I still have an element of that need to do it right, that it's not good enough, and I work towards that. And it's not what it was at one time, but it's still there.
It's right here.
Oh yeah, right
Yeah,
here.
I know. I saw it.
Yeah, it's right here. You bet.
How long has that been there?
57 years. I'm 60, so probably since I was.
Who taught you weren't good enough?
Who did?
Yeah.
Both of my parents, because when Michael mentioned, or somebody mentioned, coming home with an A or an A minus, and it was, well, how come it's not an A plus? And if it wasn't an A plus, my father went to the extreme of the line where you had to sign on the report card. If it wasn't up to his standards, he'd sign way off the line.
Not good enough.
Yeah,
for him.
So that was the frame. In fact, I swam for the Peruvian national team and broke my father's Olympic record when I was 16 years old.
Whoa. And
he was at the end of the pool, and he said to me, "I know that was great, but I know you can do better." I interpreted it. My read of it was I wasn't good enough, and I was 53 years old before I figured that one out.
What resource do you have that gives you permission to not What resource do you have access to that gives you permission to optimize, to do the best you can and be satisfied with it and enjoy it, knowing that you're no longer in that family?
I think, Bob, the resource I have now is that I've got a string of victories, and I've won a lot, and I think that over what's occurred in my life over the last couple of years, I think has been the thing that's given me the opportunity and permission to optimize.
To optimize.
Yeah.
So it's okay with you to optimize?
Yeah.
And when you say it's okay for me to optimize, what happens down here?
There's still probably a vestige there, but it also acts as a propulsion system.
Yeah. Do you need it? Does it serve you well?
Probably not, because it migrates to other parts of my body.
Just went over here.
Yeah, I went over there because I kind of checked. I checked because I've had this, I've had the shoulder issue off and on for
right
6 weeks. 6 weeks before we came here, it's sort of cropped up, and I know that it has the same. They're connected.
I appreciate Stephen letting me play with him. My purpose in doing this is, as a psychotherapist, I'm running this not good enough frame all the time. This learned stuff.
Yeah.
And to be able to give yourself permission, find out whatever resource you've got, to give yourself permission to just be and be satisfied and live in enjoyment, to optimize, is freedom.
Yeah.
True freedom.
It's the frame. I mean, I just, as you were speaking, Bobby, it's the frame that gave me permission to sing in the choir, because when I was, 11 or 12 years old, I got told by a music teacher that I had to take up stamp collecting. So I have a hell of a stamp collection. It's almost flawless.
Yeah. What's the purpose of being good enough? We'll get you kids.
What's the purpose?
Yeah, by being good enough. By being good enough, what does that give? It's so important.
What will you get?
I'll get approval.
Get approval.
Yeah. Get approval.
And by having approval, what does that give? It's even more important.
That I'd be loved.
You'll be loved?
Yeah.
And by having love, what does that give? It's even more important being loved.
Then I'm okay just as I am.
You're okay just as you are. And by being okay just as you are, where is your source for being okay just as you are? That's greater than being okay just as you are.
My connection with a higher power.
And by being in that connection with your higher power now, based upon your belief system of being connected to that higher power, and applying that to this feeling of not good enough, what happens? How does your connection with the higher power transform and enrich not being good enough? By saying yes to your connectivity to your higher power and no to that old limiting belief you're not good enough. Say yes to your connectivity to your higher power. How does that transform and enrich not being good enough?
It dissolves it.
That's good. Give him a hand.
Dissolves it.
Kevin. Yeah. Every time the not good enough comes up, just if any vestiges of that, any residuals of that pops up, just immediately go. Pops up, bring it in.
I was just wondering, I was thinking about it as I was listening, about a nuance or some type of a challenge.
A little louder, if you would, Kevin.
A nuance for a challenge to some of these hang-ups that we get, that it's not enforced from out there, that they're in here, and we just know we must do certain things and you can't do certain things. And that's simply the challenge being who says that?
Who says that?
Who point them out. Who says that?
Yeah, good question.
And
Meta model the hell out of it.
Who says it's not good enough? Who says that
you
can't do this just as okay?
This is so, this issue of not good enough really can cause us a lot of heartache through a lot of years.
So on this continuum, a lot of those people who have struggled this are over at that defeatist and skepticism end of they've just given up.
Give up. Yeah.
Trying to reach goals. They may now not like goals, not like setting goals, not like moving there because it's been so painful and distressful, and so they refuse now to compete or to go for something.
You either give up or work yourself into burnout trying to be good enough. You don't know how to live in the middle. And see, that's where metastates are. Metastates gives you permission to live in the middle. John Bird's new book on equilibrium talks all about that. Gives you permission to live in the middle and gives you flexibility on all these meta programs.
That's when you're talking about ADD kids. They're in the perfectionism or the defeatist.
Either one?
The other one, never in the middle. And I imagine it's very similar for the stuttering kids too. They're in the perfectionism or the defeatism, and they're just not in the optimism. Don't know how to go there.
And then Tony.
I actually visualized this one for myself, trying to deal with it for many, many years. And it's more like a ring than a line.
More like a ring?
A ring.
Than a rung on a ladder? Okay.
Like a ring?
Yeah.
Where perfectionism is sitting right next to defeatism and skepticism.
It's sitting.
Perfectionism is sitting right next to, on that ring, defeatist and skepticism.
Okay.
You just drop back and forth between one and the other. There's almost no border between the two. And then as you move up and around, you're in that optimizing.
Tony.
I was just curious if helping somebody go from either perfectionism or defeatism to optimizing, if you could help them switch their meta program to self-reference, good enough for me, good enough for you, you know what I mean?
You're coming along real good on these meta programs, Tony. You're doing good.
So there are some personality patterns that we say are polar patterns. We're at this polar end, we're at that polar end, the two poles of something. So you have a polar disorders like manic, depressive, and other kinds of things. And the system, the human system, the neurosomatic system, is oscillating back and forth, and there's no continuum. So now we've got the meta program black and white, either or, and it's oscillating that way. And so to move to the middle, the golden mean, Aristotle's golden mean, or to use psychosynthesis, Roberto Osceola's psychosynthesis is to rise to a higher level that will be a unifying thing that allows us to get balance in that middle. And of course, that's what Bob did with moving to what are you searching for? What is the outcome of the outcome of the outcome, and that will find that balance in the middle.
And for those in Meta NLP, we went over this quite a bit. That when you chunk up on any problem behavior, you separate behavior from higher positive intent. Up here, you will find the metastate resources to heal the problem. Therefore, every problem carries with it its own resource for its healing. Purpose of that, purpose of that, purpose of that, purpose of that, purpose of that. We'll eventually get up there like it did with Stephen, connectivity to God, which is his higher state. There is a resource to heal that problem. Purpose. We spend a great deal of time in Meta NLP training on this.
So in metastates, we call this aligning our attentions at the behavior level from the intentional. And when we bring those highest I's and the highest state of being into that, and notice how that transforms this, then it balances it.
Then we have mental health. When our attending matches our intending and they're congruent, we're living in mental health.
So then instead of moving through the world trying to get there, we use this as the basis of our life in the world.
And Tony, that's exactly what we're talking about. Optimizing and perceiving right out of that. So it's not so much about setting a specific goal. It's about living in and through that.
Right, understand it. And I think it's just a matter of... I think it's more a matter of we're just saying the same thing using different words.
Yeah.
More than
you know about your higher intentions and how to align your higher intentions with your attention. You are miles and miles ahead of 99% of people probably out there, at least 90%, as far as mental health. It's the essence of it. I think building a map that matches the world out here symbolically as far as possible. Our map symbolically represents the world we live in now and the one we want for the future, and having our attention and our behaving in line with our higher intentions. Those two components, we're going to do okay.
So we started with a meta program. We showed how the meta states are involved in it, and of course some of the meta model language as well. And these three are just different facets of the same thing.
So you can see how a little bit of therapy can do massive changes in meta programs, can't you? Yeah, Reef.
In your experience, let me say it another way. In my experience, I seem to find more problem areas at this modal operator level. Do you find a greater percentage of stuff starting there?
You say modal operator?
Uh-huh.
Have to, should, and...
Uh-huh.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. Yeah, a lot there, yeah.
And do you perceive this to be about the third or fourth level of abstraction, or...
Well, I don't know.
think that makes a difference.
Many different levels. I'm not sure what you mean by your question.
Either this one I recognize quicker, sooner, or it's more prevalent in people. This one.
Yeah. Well, perfectionist by have to be good enough. If you put those structures in, it's quite prevalent. But, there's a lot of other problems. It's just that perfectionist frame devastates people.
Right.
And I don't know if those of you feel free to say, how many of you here have had problems with perfectionism? I have. Boy,
okay.
Look. Whoa.
There's your answer.
Whoa. That's higher than what I thought. Thank you. I run into it a lot. And then they'll have the modal operators driving it. Yeah. And it's well-meaning parents who do, like all of us, the best they could with what they have. Well-meaning parents or significant others in childhood where we learned that. Yeah.
So when you look at the world through perfectionism or through defeatism, then as a meta program, it really runs just all the goals that you have, and it's not going to be all that productive.
Yeah, it can meta state a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah, just imagine this kind of occurred to me during some of the discussions that if you never measure up, is anybody else in your life ever going to measure up?
Exactly. Yeah, because if you have that meta program, you look at anybody else, and you're
right.
If
you've got kids, you're seeing them through that lens.
Yeah. And you're hurting. Okay. You did the best you could with what you have. Fortunately, you've got time to correct it, and your wife's going to give me a bonus. You need a good life.
You like to get apple pie?
Yeah, I love apple pie with a little bit of vanilla ice cream instead.
Henry Nouwen in Out of Solitude says even when your parents aren't trying to teach you that perfectionism is the way to go, because we get praise for doing something well, sooner or later we sell our souls to those who are the highest bidders for what we do well.
Whoa. Ouch.
So it's not necessarily our parents.
Ouch.
Yeah. We sell ourselves.
Steve?
To go along with what Russ had said, I had an experience of my son who was the first breaststroker in the family, and he was an extraordinary breaststroker. Everybody else was
the first one in the
I know. Once again, it's one of those that comes out and you kind of want to retrieve it.
Well, a good comment break, right? Is that on videotape, Tom?
Anyway.
What was the context?
In the pool.
Oh, in the pool.
In the pool. It was a state breaker. And
that worked.
He was swimming in a meet, and I had the opportunity to be able to watch him from above. There was a balcony over this pool, and I was with a really good friend of mine, and I wanted him to win so badly that I was almost off the balcony, egging him or urging him on, not egging him on, but urging him on. And I remember this friend of mine that was with me grabbed me by the back of my trousers and pulled me back and said, "Zach's swimming the race, not you." And it was a state shift, but had me see that's the way I was operating. That I needed, if I couldn't be perfect, if I couldn't make the Olympics, then I wanted, him to make the Olympics, and I ultimately, what I did is I killed his interest in swimming, and I didn't realize that until sometime later.
Okay, we move on to number 26. We're making good time, so we're going to be able to. Tomorrow will be total matter program, so we're in good shape.
All of these are now in the category of how we make choices, how we choose to move through life, the use of our will or coordination. And so our preference was for making choices about different things, how we go after goals, whether options or procedures. This is the buying sort, how we think and perceive and pay attention and sort for when it comes to making a purchase. And so there's four key qualities or criteria that's on this diamond, from what cost to time to convenience to quality. And a lot of us will have different criteria that we'll use. Sometimes use the criteria all the time, and then other times there'll be specific things. But when it comes to making a purchase, what do you sort for? And if you were to put a check mark somewhere around that diamond, on one of the ones or between a couple of them, where would be your choice? And we can choose different levels of purchase. But when you go to make a purchase for something important, what's important to you?
Jim was telling us all about that a while ago. Where are you, Jim? Over $50, I believe you said.
Yep, over $50, or if you want to play with over $1,000, that's really fun.
Over $1,000, okay.
Okay. Quality is highly important, and cost, trying to balance cost and quality is probably the hardest challenge. Time, I'll spend forever.
So you don't need it now.
That's not a thing. Time's not a thing.
So if we had a line between cost and quality, you'd be right in between there.
Right.
Right in here?
Yep.
Okay. Obviously, the context.
Well, I expect a lot of quality for what I pay for. I will buy it at some point. It just will bring the cost will come down to meet my.
So think about the last car you purchased. What were the most important things? When you'd pick it up, when you could get it, or the cost of it, and saving money on it, or the convenience of how maybe it being delivered, or the convenience of learning about it, the convenience of what the car provides, or the quality.
This is where Bob's at on car. I'm a consumer report guy. I want to find out the longevity of it, which also brings in the cost. Because sometimes by paying more, you save more. You buy a higher quality automobile, so it'll last a lot longer. So I'm like Jim. I'm kind of yeah. Okay.
So when you go to purchase a meal, one of the evening meals here, what are you sorting for? Calories. So the quality. The convenience.
Convenience has been a big thing here, especially for lunch, yeah.
Or how long it's going to take before you get the food.
Okay.
Where would pragmatism fit in on there? Like what?
Okay, hold on a minute. I can't hear it.
Where would, if you sort for the most practical?
It might be convenience.
What do you mean by practical?
For example, car. Not necessarily highest quality or lowest cost or even convenience or time, but practical.
I'll say practical. Maybe your sense of convenience.
How do you know when it's practical?
It'll be reliably get me from here to
That's
there.
That's quality.
Yeah.
I was just thinking when I bought my last car, and it was quality was the critical piece. Much more important than anything else, and time was secondary because I wanted it now.
So right.
I didn't want to wait.
But not necessarily luxury, but reliability.
Quality.
No, that's your sort, not my sort. I wanted reliability and other stuff too. Yeah.
Okay. I believe we can. Let's see. We'll cover two more and we'll get through this section. That'll be good, okay?
Okay, and I think also that need and want is going to influence this.
Need and
Need
want.
for food, need for shelter, as opposed to want, jewelry. You know, jewelry is not a need. Timepiece might be. That influences me as to whether it's a need or a want.
Or it's a need or a want.
So what do you sort for with one? What do you sort for with the other?
With the need, I would go check the cost, the quality.
And quality? Okay. And yeah?
The cost and quality are going to be primary there for me.
Okay, so we...
Want, time's going to be
Time.
in there. Yeah, because if it's not a need, it can wait.
Okay.
So if it's a need, then it can't wait.
Right. And
so therefore you'll pay
and
more.
My need might not be your need, but it will certainly influence how I sort.
So a lot of times in natural disasters, some people will come out with water or gas or something, and all of a sudden they're charging 4 or 5, 10 times more, because right now, the time and the need,
still got to
and
have
then they'll
it.
gouge.
Yeah. Their greed clicks in, so...
But if you just want it, then the time might be reduced unless you're real impatient.
Number 27, responsibility sort.
This is the one we came up. In fact, I came up with this originally when I was first renting houses and wanting to make a determination. How do I figure out what someone could be a responsible person to rent a home? And so we came up with a continuum between under-responsible, someone not taking enough responsibilities for what they can do and think and feel and act, and those who are responsible, and then those who are over-responsible and take on too much ownership, leading to a caretaking intrusion. And so here's a continuum, and people moving through life, we all tend to have a meta-program in terms of the things I do. Am I responsible? Am I not responsible at all? To what degree am I responsible? And so degree of responsibility, ability to respond and to be held accountable by others, and whether I welcome that, whether I don't like that and hate that, whether it's an acceptable... This is actually a meta program, because it's really about a concept of response ability, response power. And so a continuum, just describing it, defines it, and then asking what are the glasses I have with responsibility for learning, my responsibility for career advancement, responsibility for health. What's your how do you think about that? Of course, at one end, you're going to have people not being responsible and holding other people responsible, or holding the world or drugs or something else responsible for that. And then other people who take responsibility that doesn't even belong to them.
Dysfunctionality, codependence.
So would you use a question for elicitation?
Hold on, just Mike.
So would you use a question for elicitation that may be outside of context to try and get that? I think you alluded to it maybe with the health. Maybe give us an example in elicitation.
Okay. Are there some of the questions in there?
We don't have it in the book.
Okay, so the question would be in the figuring out people.
Just think of think of a major task that you've got to perform, and how responsible you feel for it. Of course, if you're working with a person, a lot of these meta programs are, if you're with a person for a while, just observation. I mean, you think about family members or people you work with, you know where they are on the continuum.
Or you know where they are relative to you.
Yeah, that's right. Tim.
We who coach and treat others, if we get into the third one, it can lead to a lot of stress.
Oh.
Yeah, that's
Owning
when
their
we're in it
outcomes
for ourselves, not for them.
Exactly. I've made a massive shift there in the last, 5 years or so.
That's how come I like when I work with counselors, I say, let's presuppose that all your stuff's going to be fixed. We still want to be a counselor. I love asking that question.
So in the context of coaching, counseling, those kinds of things, asking, does the person have to get well? Does the person have to get fixed? Does the person have to learn everything you can offer them? And that's the difference between I'd like that to they've got to. And I'm going to do everything possible to get them there. And then a lot of times we're working harder than they are.
What we got there?
And sometimes in systems, there will be people who are pushing other people to do that. They'll say, you have to make this person better, which I think is fascinating.
Here are some of the questions. When you think about having or owning responsibility for something in a work situation or personal relationship, what thoughts do you have about that? What do you feel about that? Has someone ever held you responsible for something that went wrong that felt very negative to you? What positive experiences can you remember about someone holding you responsible for something or validated you for being responsible? So those would be some elicitation questions. Asking a person's kind of history of responsibility and how they handled that and interacted with that. Of course, responsibility goes back to a sense of I have my powers of thought and emotion and speech and behavior, that power zone, and when a person really owns that, then they're not blaming, accusing, distracting, or intruding into someone else's ability to think their own thoughts and have their own feelings.
Okay. One more.
We talked about the convincer sort before. What convinces you? This is in relationship to people. And we have trusting, distrusting. This is one of those psychosocial stages of Erik Erikson as we're born. One of the very first stages we go through is trust. Can I trust the world? Can I trust my caregivers? Can I trust the environment to take care of me? And of course, if people are not trustworthy, then we learn you can't trust people. They say things, but they won't do. They make big promises, but they won't come through. And so we can learn to become distrusting, and that can become our style of interacting with people. So when you think about strangers, do you naturally have a sense of trusting them or not trusting them? They've got to prove themselves, or I'll assume that they're trustworthy until they prove otherwise. And so a continuum for how we feel convinced in general and how we sort and convince about people. And so all the way from distrusting and being paranoid, or being naive and immediately responding to people with trust, or being able just to move through the world with a sense of trust and looking for and having awareness of the signs of trustworthiness. So here's another way that we choose to interact with people. So we put it under the choice category.
A person who's distrusting, how will they be about building relationships? A distrusting person has difficulty building relationships. This is where, you go through several divorces, you can end up distrusting. Sometimes just one divorce, you can end up being distrusting. So what would encourage you to do is kind of step outside those frames. Are they serving you?
So like the meta program we looked at earlier, best case, worst case scenarios, optimist, pessimist, this here is one of those filters that we've made a map about people, whether they're trustworthy or not, and whether we can trust or will trust. And so we've made a map, and now it becomes a filter by which we go through the world. And once again, we can hear this in people. As people talk, we can hear whether they're operating with this meta program or that one.
It's interesting. I was thinking with a trust-distrust one, you get an individual in an abusive relationship. One of the things they generally tend to do is stay in the detail, because if they go to the big picture, then they have to act. And another one is because they're staying in the detail, they're trusting that things will change and get better, even though there is no history for that happening or reason to believe it actually.
So how many tend to be on the naive end of the thing and just trust people? Okay. And how many would be more toward the other end and question trusting people? Okay. And then, of course, somewhere in the middle is probably the more optimal way of looking for signs of trustworthiness, giving trust as we start, but having some cautiousness in there, and finding out, because it's not only the state of trust, it's also the state of trustworthiness in the other person. So if it's blind trust, and children, we're all born that way. We're all born with blind trust. We don't know who our parents are. We haven't gone through looking at their certificates for Parenting 101. We trust it, and then we can get hurt, and then we can close up. So we start out trusting, but it's naive trust. It's a trust without any conditions, any concerns, and then we learn to have concerns. Then we learn to have awarenesses, and that kind of cautiousness is useful and appropriate, and especially if we are in charge of this feeling of trust and trustworthiness, making ourselves trustworthy. So the trustworthiness for our own selves is when I say things, I'm going to do, which goes back to the previous meta program, response able. So that we can operate from a trustworthy standpoint, which then invites trust and makes it easier for others. And if others, with all the ability to act in a trustworthy way, if they don't trust it, it's really their problem.
Dan?
Is there ever a category where it's just unverified trust? In other words,
that naive trust, yeah.
Well, I'm talking about when somebody tells me something in counseling or other times, I take it as information, but unverified information, and I don't treat it as not being true, but I don't necessarily stake my life on it.
That's in the middle of the continuum, to where you got some trust, but some skepticism, and it's kind of a balance in there. Trusting skepticism, skeptic trusting, and so it's in the middle there with a little bit of mixture of both. And that's probably a good place to be until we get some evidence, one way or the other, and we move more toward one end of the scale toward another with a given person, given situation.
Depending on the convincer strategy.
And then our convincer strategy will come in. What are we looking for that will convince us to trust or not trust?
Coming from the naive end of the scale, the thing that I finally did was get some good, solid boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
I operate from a phrase, love is always eager to believe the best. Eager to believe the best. Doesn't mean it's blind trust. Doesn't mean it's naive. But it's open for the possibility of trust. But it's with wisdom.
Right.
Yeah, I love, that's in the middle. That's what I try to operate by.
I started out with a frame of distrust, growing up in a rather abusive family. And probably, I guess, somewhere in the 30s, ages of 30s.
A little louder, Jim, quickly.
When I was in my 30s, I worked with someone and discovered kind of an interesting frame that was more helpful for me, which was that I could trust people to be who they were, and what I needed was evidence. You know? And so that's how I found my way to something that resembles the center. I don't think it's exactly there, but it works for me.
That's there. You don't just, there you don't just totally distrust people. You're open for them to reveal that they're trustworthy. Yeah, that's kind of in the middle. And notice Jim said, come out in an abusive family, learn distrust. Again, therapy, reframing, change that. Change the meta program.
As we start this morning, our design is to finish the meta programs, and we like to have more exercises today than we had yesterday, because it's the exercises that really can tune up your ears to hear what's going on. So as we make the presentation this morning, the biggest question for you, I think, at this point, for all of us, is where do I fit in this scale on any one of these continuums of this meta program? Where am I coming from? Because one of the things about hearing anybody else's meta programs is we hear their meta programs through ours. So if I don't know mine, I may not know how to take into account theirs. So the very first thing is just awareness of yours. And so as you check that, and check through different contexts, in the business context, in the personal context, in this context, in that when I'm here, when I'm there, I tend to move here. I may have flexibility of consciousness with this meta program. This one here I may not. It may be a driving, critical meta program. So the very first awareness is that. And so when we ask questions as where you are on this scale, it's really not a question, for a response. We're not really asking a question, except allowing you to be engaged to find out, where am I here and there? And the biggest thing at first in understanding the meta-programs is just understanding how do they work and how do they filter my perception of the world, and then recognizing other people's meta-programs. And so we'll do more exercises today in order to do that. The newspapers is designed to do that, to tuning us up so that we really tune up our linguistic ears and recognize also the neurology of each of these meta-programs. Most of the meta-programs can be seen on the outside if you have eyes to see, and you can hear them on the outside with linguistic markers if you have ears to hear. So when we come back, we're going to do some of that distinctions, and then we'll talk about how to develop more and more skill of reading meta-programs, both linguistically and non-verbally. So that's the design for today. So we do have a lot to cover. If you think about these meta-programs as just sets of filters, some are mental, some are emotional, some are conation, some are the response patterns that we do, communication and behavior, and then some are meta-level meta-programs, and we'll cover those today. That'll give you categories to put them in. I would say don't worry about memorizing them at this time. That the memorization is not that important at this time. More important is just the whole domain of meta-programs. And so as we get into this, just kind of go with it. One of the things about meta-programs is that if they're not activated, if you're not using a particular one, if someone else is not using a particular one, it will not be energized or activated. It just won't be present, and it won't make any difference. But the ones that are activated, the ones that do make a difference, they will tend to stand out and be salient in your awareness and consciousness, and be just if you know to look for that pattern. And so that's what we'll do today as we get into that. Did everybody hear my meta-programs as I just presented that? Use meta-programs. They're showing it all the time. Was I offering you something to go forward or away from? Okay. Was it giving you a global picture or details? Okay. Was I giving you a procedure or an options? See, they'll stand out if you just ask yourself those questions. So it's not that difficult. Actually, it's very easy, but all you have to do is just ask yourself that question. So the more you practice, the easier it will be to do that kind of thing. Was I very surgent, associated, or unassociated? Not yet, Ashley. Associated and unassociated. Or to what degree, what extent? Okay, in sensory awareness, probably. But my own associated, dissociated? Okay, and what would give you cues of associated? Was I more like this? Or... So I may not have been doing this, cheerleading meta-programs, but I was still more engaged than disengaged. And so associated, dissociated. So we just go through that process, and one of the nice things you can do, and I would recommend this, is have your sheet and watch a talk show, and just look for one thing at a time for a while. Then look for the next thing, and when they occur, they will pop. They will become salient and pop into your awareness, and there it is. Because oftentimes a certain meta-program won't be there. And so you don't need to know it if it's not there, because it won't make any difference. And so we'll go through the meta-programs. We'll keep practicing them and working on them until we have some real skill with that. And in the next couple of days, they'll become more and more salient in our minds. We do want to open up with an open frame this morning, just comments, questions as we kind of wrap things up. We will be doing more about meta-programs today, so you may want to save meta-program questions for a little bit later, but other things. Okay.
It's what you're saying, since I'm a detail person, this sort of thing, to start at global and go down the list and looking for things when you check off global and you check off this rather than...
Let me hold that question up for a little bit, because we are going to talk about a process for how to learn to use meta-programs and learn them. So we're going to come back to that in a little bit.
Well, for the benefit of the people who didn't go to the movie last night, Michael's right. We've got to start writing movies.
It's better content, but still great structure. In the future, they have a, what would you call that? A computer generated screen? An interface. So instead of having a little computer screen like we have these days, they had this whole wall thing, and they could even say, go to the wall. And it's kind of a wall, as well as three-dimensional, holographic, kinesthetic. So instead of typing, you have some kind of gloves on there where you can pull out an image and expand it. It's really cool. And from a structural standpoint, what if you had a screen in your mind that was 40 by 40? 40 by 40. So when you pull up something out of one of your memory banks, you put it on the screen, and then you double it, and then double that, and then double that, and then zoom in or zoom out. I mean, these are the cinematic features of consciousness. Most of us do not see on the inside as clearly and with as much sharp distinction as when you look around this room. And so it was in the movie last night, which I thought was an interesting thing, just little flashes. Most of the movies that flash in the consciousness of my mind are just little flashes, little bits and pieces. The ability to hold an image and make it more and more solid is a developed skill that we can do. And it's one of the things that I've been practicing and working on, to where I can take an image of Larry and put that on my mind, and I can make him twice as big, and I can walk around and hold the color, hold the constancy. And so that is a learned skill. Some people apparently can just have a natural skill at doing that, and some artists can just make that picture and they copy it. So that is a human possibility. And sometimes it's the size that makes that difference. So making it larger helps. Making it 3D using some other things. So it was a great NLP movie in the sense of some of the structural things. The content, could be better. But it was dramatic. You got to appeal to the 18-year-olds, I guess, in making these movies.
18-year-olds are a lot smarter than they used to be.
Well, when I was 18, I knew everything. I understand that a number of you were in here working with meta programs and newspapers and things, so maybe we'll talk about that in a bit. But if there's nothing else, let's get into our coaching groups, and we'll be back here in a few minutes. Not even Charlie Brown would do anything that stupid. And there he is. Should I steal home? Charlie Brown is in his own state. He says, I'm going to steal home. I'm going to be a hero. He says, get ready now. Here I go. Don't be a coward. Here I go. Don't be scared. Here I go. Zoom. Here I go. Don't be a coward. Here I go. Don't be scared. Here I stand. This is that kind of working yourself up into a state. He says, this is my big chance to be a hero. If I could steal home, the game would be all tied up and I'd be a hero. And so off he goes. I haven't the nerve. He says, I've got to try it. I'm going to be a hero. I'm going to steal home. And he says, first I'll dance around a little around the baseline to confuse the pitcher. And then I'll take off. So all the other kids are, Charlie Brown is trying to steal home. Charlie Brown, slide, slide. And in the dust, he lands there. You blockhead. And they all wail. We lost the game all because of Charlie Brown. And they wail. And was I out? Out? Why, you blockhead. You didn't get halfway home. So there he is. Rats. And now comes the why question. Why? Why did I try to steal home? And Linus goes out. I thought I heard a cry of anguish. Why? Why? He says, why didn't I just wait on third base? Why did I try to steal home? Why? Lines come, Charlie Brown, I've been asked to tell you that your cries of anguish are keeping the whole neighborhood awake. Why? Here's that why question. Lucy comes out. If I had stolen home, I would have been a hero. Instead, I'm the goat. Oh, please don't think yourself as being a goat, Charlie Brown. If you'll forget it, everyone else will too. He says, you really think so? She says, I'm positive. Good night, goat. Dear teammates, I've been thinking about resigning as your manager, and we accept. He says, wait till I finish the letter. Meta programs. Well, he's in that why philosophical direction. And he's going around that why. Why? Very surgent. A lot of surgency here. A lot of association here. Any other meta programs in that one? I guess we can look at it as kind of a global thing, just stealing home without really the procedure or the process or how far to slide. He had one little process, dancing around third base to confuse the pitcher. But he was really going toward something. And then away. But first was toward the hero, but then away, but then toward, then away, and that awareness. We'll see some of the other meta programs a little bit later today that fits into this. But you found some newspaper clippings. So who's got one? Let's get the microphone around, and we'll pick up some of the clippings that you found, and we'll listen for meta programs. And so before you tell us the ones you found, just read it, and then we'll see if we can hear. Then before we say anything, you say what you found.
What I did is it was about a two-page article, so I just took one paragraph.
Okay.
And to summarize it, because that's all I need to do. The topic is cryonics,
okay,
to freeze bodies, which on the cover today of the paper, that families freeze the dead in hopes that something will advance, which will permit them to be cured of the illness or brought back to life. Okay?
Okay.
And that's it right there. Okay. So they freeze the body in hopes that someday something will advance, that they can be cured and brought back to life.
Okay.
So I'm taking
everybody hearing some meta programs.
I'm taking it from the perspective of the family that would choose to do that. I personally ran through the first 22 programs. So do you want to...
No, tell us what you found.
Okay. On number 2, they're not sorting by same. They're sorting by what's different. The choice of, I can put them in the ground or I can freeze them. Number 6 is a continuum of life. Yeah. Number 7, best case scenario. Number 8, impermeable. Okay. Number 9, they're a screener. They can screen out the chatter from their family. Don't do it. That's a sin. And okay. Number 10 is the how instead of the why. 14, internal MP. Number 15, associated. Their own decision making. Number 16, they have an active MP.
Okay.
Number 19, they're bold. That's not timid, because you know you'll be judged. And in the article, there are some families that they talk about how this decision's pulling the family members apart. You know. Number 20, they're moving toward. Someday they might be healed or come back to life. And away from permanent death, I guess.
Okay.
Number 21, they have choices. And number 22, a judger. And they judge. And I stop there.
They're making the world adapt to them.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
There's
possibilities.
Options, right, yeah.
So after we go through and identify a lot of these ones, if you were to say one or two meta-programs that really stand out, that are kind of in-your-face meta-programs, which one or two are just driving meta-programs for what you just described?
Best case scenario.
Best case scenario.
It's pretty strong.
And toward a possibility?
Toward.
Okay, so
options.
That's really driving that.
Now, I just peeked down also and looked at, on number 26, when you're looking at the buying sort, cost is really no issue because this stuff's expensive. It's very expensive to rent your little cooler and freeze that body indefinitely. It's not cheap.
Yeah.
So you're looking at the quality, you know.
Okay, good. Excellent.
I would suggest maybe the judge is making the world out to them is what's really
another driver.
Really creating so much in new territory and really challenging the status quo. That's really making the world adapt to you, no matter what others think. Even if I remember correctly, a sibling who disagrees with that. This is with Ted Williams, isn't it? Yeah. One of them took the body, and the other sibling is going to court. So you adapt to me, even if it breaks up my relationship with my sibling.
Okay. By identifying the 1, 2, 3 really in-your-face kind of meta programs, now we can identify who would buy this kind. Who would be subjects for buying cryogenics? Well, people who want the world to adapt to them, who are big about possibility and best case scenario, and are willing to screen out and just go toward what they want in a self-referent way. That would be a profile for people who would be possible customers for that event. So that's why, as you go through there and then summarize, the key ones, we can find a profile. Pascal had his hand up.
This one is a common, ordinary person. It's a woman. I am just a plain, ordinary person who has deep feelings.
Tell us the context. Where is this coming from?
This came from Grand Junction. AOL, it has local sites. I took it from the personal in Grand Junction.
So this is personal.
It's a personal.
Woman looking for a partner.
Oh, this is this is a woman looking for a man.
A woman looking for a man. Okay.
It's interesting. They had men looking for women. They didn't have women looking for women, though. Little list of them. I'm just a plain, ordinary person who has deep feelings like anyone else. Looking for someone who will accept me for me. Must be realistic. If you are looking for some sexy sweetie to prop up your ego, then that's not me. If you want a down-to-earth person who has a good heart, then that's me. A lot of me's here. Perhaps we might connect. I enjoy fishing, four-wheeling, antiques, flea markets, and travel. Love my mountains.
Okay. Woo, all those meta programs hanging out. Okay, the ones that you identified?
The one I identified as associated, seems to be associated. Big chunk. I couldn't tell, was it internal, external? More toward internal, I thought. Intuitor. Kinesthetic. Possibility. You had words of possibility, we might. Sounded like optimizing. And but then again, a pessimist, maybe. So it was a little of each. She was toward and away from. If you're looking for someone, because she did say what you wanted. She also said what she didn't want. Okay. Those are the ones I found. I wasn't sure what it must be realistic. It must be grounded. I'm not sure which one that was.
So as we step back from there and think about that and get the feel for the meta program, which one is the most salient, or one or two is the most salient of all those?
Intuitive.
For you, it'd be intuitive.
Yeah. Big chunk. And a lot about identity. I'm not sure with it.
Okay.
Black and white.
Black and white. Seems fairly black and white.
Yeah. Sameness.
Sameness.
Now that really came out.
Sameness.
She's wanting people who match her through the whole entire.
She said, I'm something just like other people.
Have deep feelings like others.
Yeah. Like everybody else.
So sameness really comes out there.
Sameness, yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Let's keep moving the microphone. We'll come back if you've got a few more. Who else has got something that's... Okay, let's go to David. Let's go to David. David first.
This is a horoscope. Be prepared to face some challenges stirred up by an envious colleague. Your best defense is the Aryan's innate honesty. Stick with the truth and you'll come out ahead.
Okay.
Be prepared. What does it mean to be prepared? Be prepared to face some challenges. What's some? What are the challenges?
Okay, so you're meta-modeling it. Let's meta-program it. What are the meta-programs? Now, meta-modeling, we could just tear that thing to pieces because it's unspecified all over. Unspecificity.
Okay, yeah. So
read it one more time.
Your best defense, that's the best outcome. Looking for the best outcome. I'll read it again. Be prepared to face some challenges stirred up by an envious colleague. Your best defense is the Aryan's innate honesty. Stick with the truth and you'll come out ahead. Well, truth probably is out there rather than in here. Looking for the best defense, the best outcome.
So let's think about the meta programs here. What are some of the key meta programs in there? Toward or away from?
Away from.
So a good bit away from defenses, envious, some of the negative things that are going to happen. And then going toward would be prepared.
Stick with the truth.
Stick with the truth. Any other meta programs that really stand out for you?
Sensor. A sensor that must be in uptime, see, hear, and feel the danger.
Okay, and yet we didn't have any sensory-based words.
I think stick with the truth sound more intuition.
Be aware, look out.
Global.
If it said, open your eyes to the people you see coming down the sidewalk today, and that was the meaning of be prepared. Or today, listen very carefully for everybody who uses the word, then it'd be very sensory-based and censor, but it's much more intuitive because it just be prepared, and therefore very global.
Huge.
Just think about the globalness of all these phrases. Read it one more time and listen for the globalness of all this.
Be prepared to face some challenges stirred up by an envious colleague. Your best defense is the Aryan's innate honesty. Stick with the truth and you'll come out ahead.
I mean, this is in the clouds.
Full of normalization. It's full of normalization.
That's why the natural tendency, let's meta-model this and find this. But this is in the clouds, abstraction, therefore intuition, therefore globalness. It's just global all over the place.
By definition, horoscopes tend to be global. That way you can put your own meaning to it and believe it's true for you.
Yeah, it's more trance communication than anything else, which is why it works.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. So that's a good one. Who else has got a newspaper?
This is a political cartoon.
Political cartoon.
And my values are actually the opposite of what I wrote on here, but we go through it. Give me liberty or give me death. No. Gimme, 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 gimme. Shows a handful of money. Yes. There is no hope for the satisfied man. He died in 1933, so it's not current.
All right. So, toward or away from?
It'd be toward and gimme for sure. This is polarity, and either or. The first would give
Polarity,
me liberty, or
either
give me
or,
death.
this or that, yes,
Yeah.
no.
Let's see. I'm drawing a blank because I didn't write all those things down.
Associated, dissociated?
Associated and give me liberty. They're both associated. Give me liberty or give me death.
So very associated.
Gimme.
Maybe insurgency?
Greed or scarcity on that one also. Global on this one, give me liberty or give me death.
Okay, so once again, very global. Not a lot of details. Black and white.
Black and white, yes, Oh, I didn't see this until just now under here. It has CEOs.
Okay. Who else has got a newspaper, classified or something?
This is just a newspaper article. Some ladies writing back because in a previous article some guy complained about minors and called them drunken sloths. So he generalized that she was really upset. And the article had also been about naming a school. And then her response is, I personally do not care what the school is named or what its mascot may be called, but I take offense to your ill-advised characterization of minors as being drunken sloths. So I found that self-referent.
Yeah, definitely.
Specific.
Okay.
I'll just read it one more time. I personally do not care what the school is named or what its mascot may be called, but I do take offense to your ill-advised characterization of minors as being drunken sloths. I thought that was verbal in terms of visual, auditory, kinesthetic. It's all names. Auditory, sorry. Yeah. Then black and white. So, and then just associative, which is
okay. And very away from. I don't care what this is, but I take offense. So very away from.
Oh, and I put assertive as well. Assertive was the starts here, or aggressive.
Assertive
maybe.
moving toward aggression.
Sloths. 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 Like
Sloths.
Sloth.
Okay. Who's got another one? Anybody have another one? Go back to Pascal again.
Here's an interesting one. This one is a man looking for a woman. Looking in earnest for a lady that wants someone to love her, looking for someone to rush home to after work, or just call and say, let's do lunch, and not get blown off for someone else. Someone to hold and talk with about everything and nothing. Someone that is with the bar thing, and not that I won't go out to the bar, just want someone to go with, that I don't have to worry about going home with someone else. Looking for someone to call my own that wants to have me in return. Yes, I have had some bad marriages, and I know that it takes
well over one.
that it takes two to tango. But I can't get out of them what I did other than to love much for their lifestyle and ask them to come home instead of the bar.
So is that a persuasional piece or what?
I don't know. I don't know if you get anyone to go out with them after this.
Oh, okay. We're going to find a meta program a little bit later today on honesty or putting on fronts, and this guy's just kind of hanging all out. Guess I've had many these marriages. Okay, so what did you find there?
I think impermeable. His emotions are everywhere. It seems like he's
so multi-directional in his emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, multi-directional.
He seems associated. He's reactive. I don't think he's ever convinced.
Okay, that's interesting. Never convinced.
Because he's going back and forth, arguing to himself.
Yeah, very self-referential.
He might be procedural. All he seems to do is go back and forth to bars. There's nothing about options in here. It's this or that. Although he says he takes two to tango, he has a button there. I can't get out of them so maybe he's under-responsible.
I can't get out of them. What was the rest of the
He
line?
says, I know that it takes two to tango, but I can't get out of them what I did other than to love much. Away from.
Okay. Anybody here, any other meta programs in there that stood up for you?
He has looking for someone to rush to, kinesthetic, or just to call and say, let's do something auditory, sort of.
So he's got his VAK in there.
Yeah, his VAK in there. Surgeon?
Very demonstrative.
Associated.
Associated.
Do you believe he would be more of a why than a how as he sorts for the past?
Would he be more of a why than a how as he sorts for the past?
Sorts for his past experiences.
Well,
Some
on his
marriages.
timeline, he certainly is kind of coming out and has awareness of his timeline, that the past experiences. It'd be hard. I don't have a sense of that at all.
But what about the best worst case scenario?
Best worst case.
I'm like a pessimist to me.
And I'm more of a pessimist, trying to optimize.
Any of you single ladies going to answer that, Ed? I don't think that'd work too good.
Well, and the design of this is just the realization that meta programs are everywhere. They're everywhere, and if you have ears to hear them or eyes to see, you can see them, pick them up, and they'll stand out. And so we can analyze, we can go through a meta program analysis of just even the shortest pieces, and then we can step back and have a sense of what are some of the driving meta programs of the person who wrote or produced this piece. Anybody else have another one? Okay, Kimberly?
On the news this morning, there was a former WorldCom employee, and they had a press conference, and she came up to speak, and she said that she was, employee of WorldCom. She got laid off, and it was devastating. She wondered, why me? What did I do wrong? I was going to look for another job, but why bother? This, what happened to me with WorldCom. I mean, why bother? And then she started talking about how depressed she got. So I saw the all or nothing. If I can't work for WorldCom, I'm not going to work. So it was the black and white, the pessimist, the why, because she was wondering why she got laid off. And she was definitely associated.
Yeah. And so did the reporter ask her, how does that make you feel?
Now he's noted.
They always do that.
Sorry, just to comment on it, and the title on the screen said "Accounting for Greed," and she was this really fat girl. And if you turned the sound off, it looked like she was trying to bite the microphones because she was like leaning forward to all the microphones. It's just really funny.
Anyone else? We're going to start on page 114. And this is for the purpose of training our intuitions to really hear and notice and recognize meta programs. And so at the bottom of 114, practicing exercises for that and learning to detect these patterns. And we got self-preparation, tuning up your reasons for paying attention. The more reasons you have and the more realization you have that this is part of the structure of experience, part of the structure of how we interact, the structure of communication, the more reasons you have, then it'll create more motivation, more awareness, more desire, more passion for that. So making sure that you have lots of reasons for listening for the structural meta programs, accessing your best state, a state of sensory awareness and uptime. Even as we listen here to each other read, you have to really be in uptime and really be paying attention. And the more you're inside, you'll miss it. And we have to go into that structural awareness through uptime. Flexibility. Did you notice that you had to kind of move around, be flexible? You may have been anticipating one thing, but then it didn't happen, so you had to move around as you listened to some of these presentations. So accessing flexibility of our own behaviors, especially when we're interacting, communicating with somebody else, to be flexible to maybe move and pace their meta program. So those are the first three things for self-preparation as we get ready to do that. And those things will be really important when we do our exercises today. Make sure you have your reasons for going there, the motivation, sensory awareness, and flexibility. And then 5 things what to do. Assist the person into a more fully associated state. This is when we're working with somebody in terms of eliciting their meta program, that we'll want to help them to be more associated so they'll be speaking from the state, not about it. And then you'll get more pure meta programs, just like any strategy, and maybe even amplifying the state if necessary. Switching references. This is that modeling format in NLP, the temporary employment frame. If I were you for a day, how would I have to do? What would I have to do to be able to pull that off? Teach me how to do that. And then maybe even anchoring the system, slowing the experience down and recycling. And so we had to do it, read it again and again, sometimes really catching it. And sometimes when you catch that driving meta program, like we did with the global one that David offered, and then when you let me listen to it one more time from the global perspective and see if it really fits. So recycling through or slowing it down or getting it to repeat in some ways. Most subjective experiences go too fast to catch all the embedded patterns within it the first time. And so that's where the repetition can become very useful. And then inviting the person to step into and out of the experience. When we're working with a client, customer, coaching someone, that helps us to be able to tune up our intuitions for working with meta programs. So this is kind of the foundation of what we do. There'll be some more things, but that's the beginning of it. Most of that should be pretty natural, I would think, by now. So you go into your own state of sensory awareness and flexibility, having your reasons, and then you assist the other person to be more into state, maybe help them to recycle through it as they go through that experience. So this will become important in some of the exercises we're going to do in just a little bit. On the next page, developing mastery with meta programs. A great way to overwhelm yourself with this is try to learn all of them equally, to be equally efficient with all of them at the same time. Or you could take one meta program at a time and practice it day after day until you have proficiency in recognizing and using that. You may want to give yourself permission to hear the structure and to move out of the content. You read some of these things, and the content can be so juicy, so seductive, and recruit us into that story that we miss the meta programs. So, do you have permission to hear the structure? Some people talk about being afraid that they'll miss the content. And I think that's an unfounded fear that you can hear the content while listening for that structure. And most of that's because of the differential between speaking and thinking. Speaking usually occurs at 100 to 150 words a minute. We say that somebody who can really talk very, very, very fast can go maybe 200 words a minute. And you hear some of these fast speed talkers, 200, 220 words a minute. But most of us speak 100 words a minute. Well, how fast can you think? Well, most of us can think much, much, much faster. We can read, my average person reads 400 or 500 words a minute. I speed read about 3,000 words a minute. Some people can read 10,000 words a minute. And so there's a differential between how fast you can think and how fast someone can talk. So you have lots of room to have other thoughts about their talk. So that differential there. Using open-ended questions to elicit meta programs. And that's where we have lots and lots of elicitation questions. And here's one that we can do. Tell me about one of your favorite holiday experiences. And that's general enough and unspecified enough that the person will have to use their own programs to respond to that. And then we can hear. So using some open-ended, but some closed-ended questions will work just as well sometimes. Downtime questions are the questions that sends a person inside. So they have to think and go get that information. It's not readily available on their lips, so they have to go inside. And as they do that, then they have to use their own programs to carry that forward. We've noticed now through this exercise, number 6 there, not all meta programs carry the same or equal weight of importance in a given experience. Some will be more salient and sometimes it's context dependent upon what we're talking about. So then the question becomes, which meta program is most important, most impactful for this person in this context? Which is salient? Which stands out? Which drives it? The sorting grid is just that list of all the meta programs. So using that and noticing that becomes a helpful tool. And then that last thing is writing pacing statements. If a person operates from a strong self-sorter, self-referencing, who mismatches with counterexamples or with polarity responses, he will tend to feel inclined to challenge people with prove it to me statements. This can spiral into a pointless matching of wits if you don't watch out. Yet knowing this, now we can all counter this internal formatting with a pacing statement like, you seem so good at knowing your own needs that really only you can truly decide what you deem is ultimately right. No question about that. And I don't know if what I have to say will make any difference anyway, but here it is. And you can see how that paces a person with those meta programs. So any questions about learning, mastering meta programs in terms of these 2 pages here that we've just kind of walked through? Practice, practice, practice is very, very useful in using the programs. So.
There's a lot of similarities between learning meta programs and how they list strategy.
I'm thinking about the way I listen to you speak and others, and trying to analyze it. It seems to me that what I want to do is be a sensor, be enough time to listen, but then to analyze, I need to go inside to analyze, and I need to go back and forth. Do you think that's actually what goes on?
At first, that feeling of going in and out will be fairly dramatic. What is that meta program? Because you have to go in and get your knowledge, your frame. What is that? Is that global or specific? Is that associated or surgeon? And so that'll be more dramatic. As you learn those meta programs and it becomes more automatic, you can stay more in uptime with it. So one way to do that is to get one and take it with you in your uptime state, just looking for one thing. Matching, mismatching. Matching, mismatching, matching. Until that habitualizes, and then it's there. And whenever it gets activated, it's like, oh, there's that matching or mismatching.
Like learning a word, you hear it everywhere. It's like you never hear it before. All of a sudden you hear it 2 or 3 times during the day.
So you hear a word that you're not been familiar with or looking for, and now it's more in your awareness. So that's why one at a time is a great learning strategy for the meta programs. The one thing we didn't have in this text, I hadn't even thought about it, but the one thing we didn't have in this text is taking your own meta programs into account, because we will tend to see the world in terms of our own meta programs by definition. So if you're global, kind of anticipate that you'll see things in a more global way. And the relationship between your globalness and someone else's globalness. Are they more global or less global? If they're less global, you may hear it as details. If they're more global, then you may hear it as global, and that may be accurate, but it goes through our own filters, so taking your own filters into consideration. And that's why knowing our own is so important, and being aware of when we use them, when we don't, and how much of a driver they are or not. So let's...
Thank you. Brings up a point of in communication. Speaking of meta programs and looking through your frames and your meta programs when you're talking to someone else, being aware of that. What that means to me, there are cases when you can be speaking to someone that tends to globalize things across contexts, and you could be speaking in a specific context, and it'd be obvious to you. I'm talking about this, if you yell fire when you're at home in a party, it's different than if you're in a theater. You say, it ain't funny then. And some person could just move things across contexts where it seems to you obviously it's not intended. You just got to know that. And I agree with you. You got to be aware of that kind of stuff. I don't know how you train for that, but just working on it.
Yeah. Do you know your driver meta programs as we've been going through the first 20 or so? The driving ones that will tend to be across most contexts, and that really drive just the way you perceive the world and move through the world. Knowing those are really important.
I was thinking about how useful this is for, noticing in a relationship with which states are you bringing into the relationship, and maybe creating meta programs by staying in the relationship all the time with the same emotions. And if we are aware of all these classifications, we might not use the same meta programs in every relationship.
All right. One of the other things to notice, and we'll get to this in a little bit, is that in each of these readings and writings, there were values, quote unquote, things that people deemed important. The more we deem a way of seeing, thinking, feeling, acting, choosing important, then we value that meta program, and we look for that meta program in others. So especially like the ones Pascal read, men and women looking for a partner, you can hear their values. Well, values is a meta program, because what I value will color what I see. Because I'm sorting for, I'm paying attention to, and perceiving what I think is important, whether it's in a relationship or whether it's in editorial and what I want or don't want. So the values will always be part of the meta programs, and we're going to get to values as a meta program in a little bit. And so there's that interrelationship. If I think that getting the big picture is a more productive way of thinking, and it helps, then I'm not only going to believe in it, I'm going to value it. And then when someone gives me a lot of details, I probably won't value it as much until I get the big picture. And the vice versa is true on that as well. So each meta program is a value. That is, we value it and treat it as important, the ones that we find critical. So I guess we're ready for the responding meta programs. 103. When you're down, when you're fatigued, when you're exhausted, when you've extended yourself for someone, for something, and you've extended yourself, and your batteries need recharging, how do you recharge your batteries? Do you go get people to help recharge your batteries, or do you get away from people? If you go find the party and someone to talk to, someone to walk with, someone to be with, if you use people to recharge your batteries, then you're an extrovert. If you want to get away from people, have some alone time and some private time so that you can think and have your own thoughts, then you're an introvert. And if there's kind of equality there, then you're an ambivert. This is page 103. It's the 29th meta program. We've entitled Rejuvenation of Battery Sort. And this is one that came originally from Jung, I think, as part of the Myers-Briggs. Extrovert, introvert, and ambivert. So these words are not used in the sense of a person being social, per se. A person can be very social and an introvert, because when the batteries need recharging, then they need to go away.
That's the distinction that gets confused a lot. I'm very extroverted here, but you'll see me disappear. I'm recharging my batteries by myself. So I'm not extroverted. I'm an introvert when it comes to restoring my batteries.
So how many introverts? How many extroverts? No extroverts? So much for the party. So everybody get in a good mood so you can come. So how many are ambiverts? Okay, ambiverts.
This really gets confusing. People confused because they measure it socially, not in recharging batteries.
Okay, so let's get the microphone to John. So this is about what we need to do to feel better and to have more of a sense of energy and vitality, do we go get a person to be with that, and they fill us up? Or when you're with a person, it feels like you're giving, you're extending, and therefore the more and more depletion of your energies, and so the relationship with people.
So rejuvenation of batteries suggests downtime.
Right.
Which would indicate being more introverted in that context.
Well, for an introvert.
Yeah. Okay, so when people are downtime, do they usually seek out other people?
Well, extroverts do.
Okay. All right. Okay, so how does this contrast with the other context of just when you're in uptime and everything's fine? So are we contextually different?
It's really, I don't see the relationship between introvert or uptime and downtime. I see it more between self-referent and other referent, that there's a closer connection.
Okay.
The more self-referent I am, the locus of authority and control is here, and I choose, then I probably won't need as people to redo that, because I can do that with my own power zone and my own beliefs, my own values, and I can put myself in state. But someone who's more other-oriented and other-referent will look for someone to help me feel better, to get back in state, to give me juice. And so it's more other-referent, self-referent, I would think, have more of a relationship to this meta-program than uptime-downtime. Now, the uptime-downtime, obviously, the person who is an introvert is going to go inside. But they go inside because that's where their source is. That's where they get their energy and their rejuvenation, and they recover what they're about. Whereas the extrovert enjoys and needs nurturing, validating, affirmation, and they have a harder time doing that to themselves.
So what's different about the introvert in a social situation when everything's fine and they're very animated and with people and all of that? What do you call that?
Being social.
See, coming from my perspective, once my battery's charged, I want to be with people. But this is about recharging your batteries. It's not about being in a social situation. It's about I deal with people all the time. I do therapy, which is very difficult work, dealing with people with problems. And a lot of intense work. And it's usually with people. So when it comes to recharging my batteries, it's just Bob. I want to be by myself. So it's not about socializing. It's about recharging batteries.
So what Bob said brings up another twist on it, and you can ask yourself this question. When I'm with people, does it feel like I'm extending, I'm giving, it's work? Does it feel that? Or does it feel rejuvenating, playful, fun, empowering you? So how you experience other people, if it feels like you're always caring, nurturing, giving, affirming, then it can feel like energy is going out. So there will come a time when you'll need to go and recharge. Whereas if it's easy for you to be giving and nurturing and validating, and that's just putting you as to more vitality, then you could be an extrovert or an ambivert.
What happens when you have two people in like a marriage or something that are like at polar ends of the scale? Like if you have a hardcore introvert married to a really strong extrovert.
I'm one.
I'm another one.
So was I.
We really, it's. I have to give and take a lot. When there are times that she wants to be social that I really don't want to.
Yeah.
But it's called compromise. It's called building a marriage.
and
there are times you give in.
And let's make another distinction. This is about rejuvenating your energy. It's not about bonding. We don't have one for bonding yet. I've just wrote a chapter, the first chapter in this Games Great Lovers Play about bonding, how human bonding occurs. And bonding is about opening up our ego boundaries and welcoming someone in. So the bonding relationships are different than social relations. I mean, there's a whole different quality there. Whereas a bonding relationship has a lot more intimacy and different dynamics are going on. So this is not about bonding. This is about recharging your batteries.
Yeah.
And now with couples, if one person doesn't get energy from the other one, but it always feels like it's depleting, then they're going to have some time alone. Some alone time, some private time. And so the other one giving them permission to go and do that. If the other one gets it from them, then when they're feeling down, just hold me. The other one, when they feel down, just get away from me. And those are important distinctions to know for the bonding purpose, and obviously affects the bonding process.
I think that we and the press tends to judge and snub people in sports who, after the event, after the tournament, or during their free time, they want to be alone when they're out at the restaurant, when they're trying to recharge their battery, and they want nothing to do with the rest of us. Or after the sporting event, they don't want to speak with the press. They want to go and vanish. But the media wants to judge them as being mean or nasty. Like Bonds, he's somebody who says that he plays for the team, and he's very terse. He just says a few words, and because of that, he's been typecast as a surly,
it may involve this pattern here, or there may be some other patterns involved as well. Sure. Not being comfortable with people, being out of his skill levels and competency levels. He may be real competent on the ball court, but with people he may not be competent, so he doesn't even want to deal with it. So there may be some other dynamics there. From a training standpoint, if you're doing trainings and it feels like you're giving when you're doing the presentation and you need to disappear just immediately afterwards, I would suggest make some big adjustments, because the most of the giving will be afterwards. And spending quality time with people is really important. I won't name names, but there are some people in NLP like that. They'll come on stage, and when the program's off, they're gone. And so part of the job description is to be with people. Go get your batteries as charged up as you need to, and then spend some time with that. Don't immediately leave. That's just part of job description. So obviously this has lots of effects. Let's focus our questions on understanding the pattern, and really focusing clearly on, do you know where you are? Do you know what to do? Do you know how to recognize these patterns in other people?
Years ago in my training, one of the things I was trained to do in doing therapy, if I came out energized, I was doing good therapy. If I came out tired, I was working too hard. And that stuck with me all these years.
And see, I would disagree with that. Given this meta program, I would totally disagree with that, because it doesn't take into account what's your meta program. And if every counselor has to come out of the counseling activity more energized, then we're saying the ones who are more introverted who don't do that. Yeah, so that's why I would say that's not taking into account the meta program. And as Bob just described, sometimes you're laying out your own soul and working with someone, and sometimes the emotions are very strong, and it can be exhausting. I mean, with any time that we are giving ourselves emotionally, so to put that as the quality of doing good counseling or not good counseling on that, that's why I would just totally disagree with that.
I prefer not to do it 4 hours like that.
That's right. Bob does long sessions, 2-hour sessions.
2-hour sessions. Not over 4 hours. A lot of times I do 6. Boy, I sure don't. And most people in this profession don't want to do over 25 hours a week, although there are others who do. I do my best to give a lot of Bob. I do, and it's draining. That's the way I choose to do my work, and it's been quite good for me.
Brief psychotherapy has a nice process that I really like, just to throw in this with that comment, and that is they usually have the counseling room with a mirror window with observers. And then at certain times, the counselor, and when I've done this a few times in context when I was doing some learning of brief psychotherapy, you stop with your client and say, let me go see what the team says. And you say, I want you to think about what's the most important thing that you'll do this next week that's going to work with you, or whatever assignment you give them to think on. And then you go consult with the team. Sometimes you're gone 5 minutes, sometimes you're gone 20 minutes. You come back in, and the team says this and this. So it has a good breathing. When I've done cold counseling with a number of people, I've done it with a number of people in town, we'll do some of the same kind of processes. And with people who have any kind of depression, if at any way possible, we do it on a walk. We drive over to Colorado Trail and go take a walk. And that's where we do our counseling. We're not sitting on our rear ends. We're walking, seeing things, seeing beautiful things, feeling things, and walking. And I found that 10 times more effective than sitting there going over history. So there's lots of ways of doing counseling that helps to keep us more alive and energetic. So this is rejuvenating batteries, and the concept is how we interact and work with people in that way. Another people meta program is number 30, and this is called affiliation or management style.
On a scale of working totally by yourself, self-motivated, and or with a team, which do you prefer? Team. How many team people? Now this means you share responsibilities equally. You have no problem sharing responsibilities. Okay. How many of you prefer to be a loner by yourself? These are the entrepreneurs of the world. You know, I've heard the definition of an entrepreneur is someone who can't get along and work with other people. When I first heard that, I laughed, and then I realized I was laughing at myself because there was some truth to it. Yeah. There are those who, can do both, team and self. Now, this is very, very important in choosing people for management and teamwork. This is extremely important meta program in the corporate world.
Well, maybe before we do the question, let's go through all these distinctions and get these real clear before we start questioning. So the first one is team, and then go ahead with the other ones too.
Team and self.
Distinctions.
These people can work by themselves, self-motivated, or they can work with others. They have no problem switching back and forth, from team or self, no problem. They're self-motivated. They don't have, they don't require a lot of motivation. A person who works with a team has to be in that social setting and shared responsibility. They have difficulty taking responsibility for themselves, as a rule.
Well, I think if you read the Help Wanted ads, you will find that human resources people sort for team. They basically just read the ads that say, must have excellent verbal and written communication and work well with others. Mm-hmm. The standard boilerplate. Linda, you're the expert on that.
I have found that unless we have an equal balance of both type of people, everything's going to fall apart. Mm-hmm. So we need team people, and we also need individual people, and then it works out beautifully. Sometimes that's hard to find. Sometimes you get an imbalance, and then you fight, and then that's fun.
The one distinction we don't have on here, I don't know where it dropped off at, is the leadership. People who like to lead.
The team itself is kind of if you read the whole thing, I'm the boss or the team leader. I motivate people. I get others to do things.
Okay. So you might want to write the word leader or manager.
Yeah. Some have a management style listed here as separate.
So the question is, do you know what other people need to do to succeed in their work? Do you know that? Do you feel comfortable telling them so? Then that would be a meta program that how you're sorting for other people in the relationships is that you feel comfortable stepping into a leader or a manager role or some kind of a leadership management role that way. And if you know what they want, but you don't want to talk to them, tell them, coach them, give them feedback, then you're more in the following role and know how to do something and to carry it through. A lot of people who know but doesn't want to say will end up being in bureaucracy. And so it's not a true leadership form. If your answer is no, I don't even pay attention to what other people are doing, it just doesn't even make any difference, then you're more in the self mode of just doing what you need to do and just getting on with it. And so this meta program has to do with how we sort for when we're working in a context that may involve other people. How aware are we of our other people? Do we know what they need to do? Are we skilled at motivating them? Do you like motivating them? Do you like saying encouraging words? Are you able to go out and comfort them, affirm them, coach them? Then you're more into the management role or the leadership role. Do you have a sense of things we're not doing that we could do that would move into the future? Then you're moving truly into leadership. So the difference between management and leadership is managing a process that's already set up, and leading is inventing something new and having visions of where to go next, and so the pioneering kind of attitude. So really we need to have managing and leadership inside this affiliation management source, and I would drop that out. It's not in here. So if you know where you are in that, and then recognizing other people with those meta programs.
In the lab profile, there's a meta program called rule structure, which my rules, my rules for me, my rules for you. It sort of sounded like that, and I was wondering where else that that meta program would fit into in the scheme of 51 meta programs.
Yeah, right here.
Right here.
Right here. And we usually have that question of, do I know my rules? If I don't know, do I know what to do to succeed in my work? And if I don't, then I'm in a place where I need to be managed and led completely. So some people, I would guess nobody here even comes close to that. Then the next one is, do I know my rules for how to succeed, how to motivate myself, what to do? Then that's the self. Do I know rules for you? Well, that bureaucracy. Do I know rules for you and feel comfortable in giving and extending and nurturing and coaching you that way, that managing role? Do I know rules yet to invent that would make everything even better? And that's leadership. So that would be the question, and how we filter. And so when you're working with a group, to what extent are you sorting for and paying attention to what's going on in the group and different relationships that way?
There's another.
There's another variant on this. Do you feel comfortable coaching people, but does your manager feel comfortable with you coaching them?
So in a bureaucracy, probably the answer is no. And in a true leadership system. So. The next one is a very obvious one, number 31, communication stance. These are what's called the Virginia Satir categories, the stances. And we've got 5. My guess is everybody's very familiar with this. This has been NOP for a long time. Of course, came from Virginia Satir. Placator, wanting desperately to please, and so very high other reference experience. Placating, getting approval, never violating the approval of somebody important. Blamer is the opposite side of that. Someone in charge, someone blaming, someone accusing, someone who is an extreme self-referent person. Distractor is the person who doesn't want to take a stance. Sometimes they blame, sometimes they placate, sometimes they level, sometimes they compute. Computer is the person who has moved into the dissociation stance and is just all intellect, shows very little emotion, not expressive, kind of a Mr. Spock. And then, of course, leveler is the assertive one, straightforward, just asserting what they think, what they feel, what they choose. So 5 communication stances, and Virginia Satir says the first 4 are, for the most part, unuseful and not productive, beneficial in communicating, except maybe in some rare situations. We've got another general response, and in this general response, number 32, there's 3 different distinctions: congruent, incongruent. So when a person is responding, and as a meta program, this is the way I'm sorting for things, whether I'm congruent or you're congruent or incongruent with regard to the fitting, the matching of words and actions. Competitive cooperative would be the sense of win-win, win-lose, lose-lose, or lose-win. So how competitive, how cooperative, competitive, about what, and so those are 2 other responses. And what we're sorting for is a sense of the hierarchy and the power structure. Am I winning? And if that's all that I'm thinking about, then I'd be in a win mode, and maybe win-lose mode. If I'm also thinking win-win, am I winning and are you winning? Then that'd be win-win. And so the competitive, cooperative meta program there. And then another set of responses are polarity and meta responses. The meta responses, of course, is moving to a higher logical level and thinking and feeling about whatever. And so the way a person is responding is in meta responses constantly that might send a person over to the computer mode. Whereas the polarity response is jumping back and forth from the poles, and this will be more black and white. It'll be either or kind of a thinking. And of course, a polarity responder is very responsive. It's just in the opposite direction. And so there's those elicitation questions there, pulling out what we're sorting for.